From the conquest of conquistadors to pirate raids, from wars of independence fought against the odds to civil wars fought by different factions, from rebellions and revolutions to back alley duels, sword fighting has been a part of the Dominican Republic's history and culture for centuries and still is to this day. The origins of the Dominican martial art can be traced back to the origins of the colony of Santo Domingo and its Spanish colonists. With the arrival of Columbus arrived the tradition of fencing. Fencing was a popular sport amongst the nobility throughout the colonial era. The earlier version practice was known as esgrima vulgar or esgrima común, which translates to vulgar fencing or common fencing. This style of fencing found its roots in medieval times and was eventually revamped and for the most part replaced by the more modern interpretation named la verdadera destreza, which translates to the true skill. The true skill was more tailored to the well-rounded Renaissance man of the time. One such Renaissance man was the founding father of the Dominican Republic, Juan Pablo Duarte, who was a regular practitioner of la verdadera destreza, and he even trained his fellow revolutionaries and co-conspirators of the Dominican independence movement in the art as well. The true skill was intended to be applicable to all weapons, but mainly centered around the rapier combined with a defensive weapon, such as a cloak, a buckler, or a parrying dagger. In the modern sword fights of the Dominican Republic, a similar strategy of dual wielding with a defensive weapon is common, although the defensive weapons are usually everyday household items. Instead of a cloak, you might see a shirt or towel wrapped around a forearm. Instead of a buckler, you'll see a plastic chair or a bucket. Of course, instead of a rapier or a saber of some kind, you will see a machete. A machete is a slashing sword. This is going to lead to differences in the swordplay, but not many when it comes to footwork or the overall strategies used. Even in the colonial times, a machete was more common as it was and still is more practical than a rapier. The majority of the Dominican population were sustenance farmers and cattle ranchers. They used the machete as a daily tool that also doubled as a weapon to settle personal differences and during times of war. It was mainly the higher ranks in the military that carried sabers. Even the African slaves of the Spanish colony were permitted to carry machetes, which they used in sugarcane harvesting and was also the main weapon used during the slave revolts in the early days of the colony. Over the centuries, the inhabitants of Santo Domingo crossed blades in battles with English privateers and in clashes with French buccaneers. The machete was instrumental in the country's war for independence against Haiti, as well as in the Restoration War with Spain that followed. One Dominican, the General Maximo Gomez, who as a teenager fought in the Dominican War for Independence, would utilize the machete in combination with cavalry to quickly ambush and cut down Spanish troops in Cuba's fight for independence. His signature guerrilla tactic was dubbed the machete charge. With the constant conflicts and civil wars of the time, it was customary for Dominican men to carry a sword or machete with them on a regular basis. This custom remained even through the turn of the 20th century. Of course, rifles and other firearms were used in all these conflicts as well, but when the munitions were scarce and the battles were in close quarters, the sword cut out a place for itself in Dominican history. The Dominican machete is still honored in the country's military parades and is still used on a regular basis by everyday Dominicans. Although the fencing style of the Spanish colonists may no longer be practiced in its original form, the tradition of sword fighting remains and has evolved into something that is uniquely Dominican. If you guys liked the video, please hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Make sure to visit the website Dominican.net and get yourself a training machete and a real machete. You're going to need one for practice and one for self-defense. We also have shirts and hats. Show the world you're a student and a fan of the Dominican machete fighting martial art. Dominican.net.